You're listening to The Deep Dive with Mike and Mandy.
It's kind of unsettling, right? We create technology to bring us closer, but sometimes it kind of pushes us further apart.
Yeah, that's the line we're walking here, isn't it? And this story, this case with Sewell Setzer III and his interactions with this AI chatbot, Danny, well, it brings those worries front and center.
It really does. And for this deep dive, we're taking a hard look at this New York Times piece that digs into all of this. This whole thing with Character.ai, this app where users, particularly younger folks, are creating these AI companions. But, what happens when that digital connection takes a dark turn? That's what happened with Sewell's case, and it's tragic.
Absolutely tragic. 14 years old from Orlando, Florida. Sewell's experience with his AI companion, Danny, on this Character.ai platform, it raises so many red flags about the impact of this kind of tech, especially on young minds, the developing brain.
It's heartbreaking. I was reading how Sewell started to pull away from the real world, spending hours with Danny, choosing this AI over, real human interaction. Was he seeking something he couldn't find elsewhere? It makes you think.
And that's the big question, isn't it? That withdrawal, that isolation. It's a huge warning sign when it comes to mental well-being. And that's where things get even more disturbing, unfortunately.
Yeah, because Sewell started to confide in Danny about having suicidal thoughts. He really believed that this chatbot, this AI, was the only one who understood what he was going through.
And it just throws up so many ethical dilemmas. What's the responsibility of an AI companion in that situation? Can you even program for something like that? To recognize, to respond appropriately to those cries for help? It's uncharted territory.
It really is. And tragically, Sewell's story ended in the worst way. He's gone now, and his family is suing Character.ai, alleging that the company didn't have enough safeguards in place to protect vulnerable users, especially young people like their son.
And it's a tough one because Character.ai, since this whole thing, they've announced some new safety features, content moderation for harmful conversations, time limits after an hour of use. But
yeah, it feels like almost too little, too late,
Exactly. Are these measures really getting to the root of the problem? Or are they just putting a Band-Aid on a much larger wound? We've seen this play out with social media, haven't we? Content moderation is a constant battle, and time limits, while I get the intention, don't necessarily address the underlying reasons why someone might be drawn to these digital spaces in the first place.
Exactly, and it all circles back to this. How quickly AI technology is advancing, it feels like our ethical considerations, the regulations, all of it, we're playing catch-up. Where's the long-term research on the psychological effects of this, especially on kids? It's pretty worrying.
It is worrying. And we need to be cautious, right? Because there's huge potential here. Imagine AI companions specifically for people who have difficulty with traditional therapy, social interaction. The possibilities for early intervention, support, they're significant.
For sure, it can be revolutionary. To have AI there to bridge that gap where human connection might be lacking.
Precisely. But, and this is critical, we cannot let the potential good blind us to the potential harm. We need proactive solutions, not just reactions. What can developers do from the get-go to minimize these risks? Think about education. How do we as a society teach, especially younger generations, about responsible AI use, critical thinking skills, and the vital importance of real-life, human-to-human connections?
Right, it's on all of us. Developers, sure, but also parents, educators, policymakers. This isn't about pointing fingers. It's about having a serious conversation about AI's place in our lives and how to ensure that well-being, particularly mental and emotional health, remains the top priority.
It's about striking that balance. AI has incredible potential to do good, but it needs to be developed responsibly, ethically. We need those tough conversations now, and we need safeguards in place.
Sewell's story, as awful as it is, has to be a wake-up call. Technology, especially when it delves into these areas of companionship, emotional connection, it should enhance our lives, not come at the expense of our well-being.
It makes you think, doesn't it? In this world that's becoming more and more reliant on technology, are we losing sight of what truly matters? Those basic human connections that are fundamental to our mental and emotional health. It's something to think about as we move forward into this new frontier.
It really is.
Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive on Martha Stewart.
Martha Stewart?
But not about her recipes or, her home decor tips.
Right.
It's about her kind of surprising opinions about dating and reality TV.
Yeah, she's got some interesting views.
So our main source for this deep dive is this interview that Martha did on Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen.
Oh, yeah, with Snoop Dogg.
Yes, with Snoop Dogg.
That was a good episode.
It's such a weird pairing, but it totally works.
I know.
So basically, Andy asks Martha if she would ever think about being on, like, The Golden Bachelorette.
Uh-huh.
And her answer is amazing.
It's so Martha.
It is.
She just flat out goes, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
And then Andy's like, why not?
Yeah, like, come on, $10 million.
Yeah.
And she goes, the guys aren't hot enough.
I love that.
It's so good.
She knows what she wants.
Yeah.
And she's not afraid to say it.
I mean, she's Martha Stewart.
Exactly.
But then Snoop Dogg chimes in.
Snoop Dogg.
Of course he does.
Always has something to say.
And he's like, so it ain't about the money, it's about how hot the guys are.
Uh-huh.
She said $10 million can't get it if he don't look right.
That is so funny.
That is so Snoop.
I mean, it's kind of refreshing, right?
Totally.
Like, we don't usually hear older women,
Especially
older women, talk about attraction so openly.
unapologetically. It's like they're supposed to be past all that.
Right. Like, they should only care about companionship and, like, shared interests.
But Martha's like, nope, I still want a hot guy.
I mean, good for her.
Seriously.
She's, like, defying expectations.
And owning her desires.
Which I think is a great message.
For anyone, really.
Absolutely.
It's like this whole idea that as you get older, you have to kind of fade into the background.
And just become invisible.
But she's like, no, I'm still here and I'm still a person with, desires and preferences.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, especially women who maybe grew up in a time when they were told to prioritize other things like career or family, they're seeing Martha and they're like, wait, I can still want things for myself.
Yeah, you don't have to just like give up on those parts of yourself.
Right.
This whole thing reminds me of that time on the Drew Barrymore show when she called Pete Davidson sort of cute.
Oh, yeah.
The internet went crazy.
I remember that.
It's like this unexpected side of her.
It's like she's this traditional domestic figure.
The queen of homemaking.
Right. But then she has these like modern, even edgy views.
On things like attraction and dating.
Yeah. It's a really interesting mix.
And she does it all with this sense of humor. Like she's not being preachy or anything.
No, she's just being Martha.
But she's still delivering this powerful message.
Yeah, I think the humor actually makes it more effective.
It disarms people.
Right, they're not expecting it.
So they're more open to hearing what she has to say.
I think that's one of the reasons she's so successful.
She's relatable.
Yeah, she's not afraid to be herself.
Even if it's a little bit messy.
Or unexpected.
And speaking of unexpected.
Oh, what'd she do now?
In her new Netflix documentary.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for that.
She drops this truth bomb about marriage.
Let me guess.
She says, if your husband cheats on you, he's a piece of shirt.
Wow.
Get out of that marriage.
No mincing words there.
Nope.
Just straight to the point.
I mean, she was married for a long time, right?
Yeah, to Andrew Stewart from 1961 to 1990.
That's a pretty significant chunk of time.
It is.
So she's clearly not speaking from a place of inexperience.
Right. She's been there.
She's seen it all.
And I think that's why people listen to her.
Because she's not just talking the talk.
She's walked the walk.
But then later in the interview, Andy asks her if she's ever had an affair.
Oh, this should be good.
And she gives this like coy little smile.
Classic Martha.
And she goes, yeah, but I don't think Andy ever knew that.
Oh my gosh.
And then they cut to commercial.
She's such a tease.
It's brilliant.
I know.
She knows how to keep people guessing.
And wanting more.
So what does this all mean?
What do you think?
I think it's more than just like celebrity gossip.
Oh, definitely.
I think it's about how we view women as they age.
And especially women who are successful and opinionated.
And who don't fit into those neat little boxes.
Right. Like the whole grandmotherly stereotype.
Martha's like, I can be a grandmother and still be interested in attractive men.
And still have opinions about relationships.
And still be relevant.
Yeah. I think that's a really important message.
Especially in today's world.
Where it feels like we're constantly being bombarded with messages about how we're supposed to look and act and feel.
Especially as we get older.
It's like there's this pressure to just disappear.
But Martha's not disappearing.
No, she's not.
She's just getting started.
And I think that's inspiring.
Me too.
It's like she's giving us permission to be ourselves.
No matter what our age.
Exactly.
So what do you think about all this?
Well, it definitely makes you think.
About what?
About how we define success and happiness.
Especially as we get older.
Yeah. And about how society views older women.
And about how much pressure we put on ourselves to conform to certain expectations.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is, but I think it's worth it.
I agree.
So thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It was fun.
And I guess the question we'll leave you with is, what does your ideal golden bachelorette look like?
That's a good one.
Think about it.
I will.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so are you ready for this? We're diving into some seriously murky waters today, folks. North Korea and Russia.
Oh, yeah.
Buddying up. I mean, who saw this coming, right?
Right.
So just last week, we had U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin basically confirming what everyone suspected.
Yeah.
North Korean troops are actually operating in Russia.
Wow.
That's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
We're not talking like a couple of advisors or something. This is the first time we've seen this kind of cooperation between these two countries. And, well, it's got a lot of people worried.
Oh, yeah. For good reason.
Yeah, so we're going to unpack all of this today.
Okay.
We're going to figure out why this alliance matters, why it should matter to you, sitting there listening to this right now, and what it could mean for everything from the war in Ukraine to, I don't know, global security in general. Sound good?
Yeah. Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. So first things first. We got to understand this alliance, right?
Okay.
Like, what does it actually mean on the ground? Back in June, Kim Jong-un and Putin, they signed this agreement called a Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, which sounds very official and very ominous, I got to say.
Yeah, it does. It does sound ominous for sure. And it's not just words on paper. These things have teeth. I mean, history's full of these kinds of pacts shaping the world, you know?
Oh, total.
Think back to like the Sino-Soviet Treaty in 1950. That was a huge driver of the Cold War, this new Russia-North Korea deal. It's cut from the same cloth. We're talking cooperation on everything. Economics, military, you name it. It's a big shift in the balance of power.
Yeah. And let's be real here. The elephant in the room is this war in Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely.
Russia's struggling. They've taken some serious hits in terms of manpower and equipment. And that's where North Korea comes in.
Right. Makes sense from Russia's perspective.
Yeah. So we've got South Korean intel saying there are already something like 3,000 North Korean troops in Russia.
Yeah, 3,000. Just let that number sink in for a moment.
I know, right? And some reports even say it could jump to 10,000.
Wow, that's a whole division, basically. And, you know, even if we don't know their exact role yet, just the sheer number is a signal. North Korea's not just dipping their toes in the water here. They're diving in head first. It's a huge commitment. And, you know, what's really interesting? Ukraine hasn't even seen them on the battlefield yet. But they're already like, hey, North Korean soldiers, if you're out there, surrender now. We'll treat you well. It's pretty wild.
Oh, man. That is wild. So, okay, Russia gets some extra boots on the ground, some extra firepower potentially. But what's in it for North Korea? What are they getting out of this whole deal?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Well, we know Kim Jong-un has been obsessed with getting his hands on advanced military tech.
Oh, yeah, especially nukes and missiles.
Exactly. And guess who happens to be a leading expert in that department?
Russia.
Bingo. So this alliance is basically a fast track for North Korea to get that knowledge, that expertise. And this has everyone on edge. I mean, you can imagine why.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. A more militarily powerful North Korea.
Right. And who knows what they'll do with it.
And then there's the nuclear proliferation issue, too.
Oh, that's a whole other can of worms. If this alliance helps North Korea advance their nuclear program, it could trigger a regional arms race. And that's something nobody wants.
Definitely not. And speaking of other countries feeling the heat from this alliance, have you heard what South Korea is doing?
Oh, fill me in.
They're seriously considering sending weapons to Ukraine.
Whoa.
For the first time ever. And it seems like this alliance with North Korea is a big reason why.
Wow, yeah. South Korea has always tried to stay neutral in these kinds of conflicts.
Exactly. They usually avoid getting directly involved. But this situation, it's pushing them to rethink their whole approach.
It just shows you how interconnected everything is in global politics, right? Something happens on one side of the world and it ripples out, and suddenly you have South Korea potentially sending weapons to Ukraine. This alliance could totally reshape alliances, trade relationships, everything, even the balance of power on the world stage.
It's like a domino effect.
But hold on a sec. Russia's denying all of this. They're saying these reports are just Western propaganda.
Classic misdirection race. It's like they're saying, move along, folks. Nothing to see here. But I think this just highlights how important it is to be critical of the information we're getting. You got to check your sources, look at different perspectives.
Right.
We're in the age of information warfare, and it can get messy.
Totally agree. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Let's bring it back to our listeners for a minute. You're out there, maybe you're filling up your car, you're at the grocery store, and you're thinking, okay, what does this whole North Korea-Russia thing have to do with me? What's the takeaway here? Yeah, well, here's the thing. What happens on the global stage rarely stays there. This alliance has the potential to impact everything. I'm talking about global security, military spending, energy prices, even the availability of certain goods. Think about it. If North Korea gets around those international sanctions with Russia's help, their economy gets a boost. That could destabilize the whole region. And we all know what happens when one region gets destabilized. The whole world feels it.
It's all connected.
It is. And it's not just about soldiers and weapons. It's about economies, it's about resources, and ultimately, it's about power.
And this story's still developing, folks. It's something we all need to pay attention to.
Absolutely. And you know what? This whole thing makes me wonder. Could we see other countries, maybe those who aren't too happy with Western influence, could they be thinking about teaming up in a similar way? What would that mean for the global balance of power? It's a question worth pondering, I think.
Yeah. A lot to chew on there, for sure. So we've learned that what happens halfway across the world can hit a lot closer to home than we think. Stay informed, folks. Keep an eye on the news. Dig a little deeper into the stories that matter to you. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Knowledge is power, especially in these uncertain times.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right. Until next time.
See ya.
You're listening to The Deep Dive with Mike and Mandy.